Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland review show. A hard-fought win. Sorry, that's a lie. We drew. Shit. One, two, three. Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show. A hard-fought weekend draw in London has kept the lads within touch and distance of the playoff places, and whilst cup action is on our midweek agenda, Paul Ince's Reading provide our weekend matchup at the Stadium of Light. Reading haven't had the best time of it recently. After an excellent start to the campaign, and Ben from the excellent Tilehurst End joins me to preview this weekend's clash and give us the full lowdown on Reading. Ben, I have gone through this intro about 7 different times, but we'll pretend to the listeners that I haven't had to edit all that out, and I'll ask, how are you doing? Are you all right, mate? You okay?
Yeah, we got my name right. I've been called worse, which is a positive. So yeah, very very pleased to be here talking to you guys today, and hopefully what's going to be a good game on Saturday.
It'd be quite hilarious if everyone could listen to how many mistakes I made in that intro, but I'll leave it out. But I think first things first, obviously, just to let everyone know, we are speaking ahead of our cup game against Fulham. I'm taking in Sunnier Climbs this week. I'll be missing the match, sadly. But at the time of speaking, last game, 2-2 home draw with Watford. It seemed like a really big result for yourself in many ways. You were 2-0 down for the people who weren't aware of that. How impressive was the comeback? How was the performance, and how important was the manner of the performance and manner of the result?
I think in isolation, it on paper it looks like a good result. You know, Watford. From not from just what I saw on Saturday, but from generally this season, they'll be there or thereabouts this season. It's very difficult, really, because we didn't really get going in the game until probably 60, 65 minutes. We kind of gifted them 2 goals. Really, they were out of nothing. There was no doubt that kind of on the balance of the game anyway, they were definitely the better side and probably asking the questions that we were. And defensively, we were just a bit nervous for some reason. It was just very, very flat, the whole thing. And, you know, at 2-0, you're thinking, okay, this could end up being another 3 or 4-0, which we've loved this season, really, in terms of reverse results. Namely against you guys when you came down earlier in the season. But look, our home form has really stood for something this season, and that is, I say, a rare positive. That's probably doing a disservice to the team and the manager, but generally we've been a lot better at home than we've been in probably 3 or 4 seasons. So it was really important to keep that going, if nothing else. And yeah, it bizarrely, that last sort of 25 minutes, we were probably looking to win the game. We had a really good chance right at the end to win it. It didn't. I think it probably would have been undeserved on Watford, really. But yeah, a point keeps us ticking over. It keeps us sort of in that mid-table mediocrity slot, which we were all desperate for this season, or the start of the season anyway. So it's whether or not we can get back to winning ways quite quickly. I was on our pod last night and talking to the host on there and just saying that this is a really key period for all the teams that are trying to do something this season. And, you know, ultimately we want to be on the beach sort of early April and have a month where we can just relax and breathe and bring through some players that maybe haven't had a chance this season in terms of the youth. So yeah, look, it was a good result given that we were playing a fairly competent side, and being 2-0 down against them, it was great to get the point. But you know, we need to be in a situation where we start games a lot better than we had done, and not wait for other teams to kind of do stuff to us. We need to be on the front foot a lot more, and I really feel that we've got opportunities to do that. Whether or not that's Saturday, I don't think it will be. We'll talk about predictions, I'm sure, later on. But you know, we really have got some games coming up, Rotherham, Cardiff, that we could really get points on the board and kind of have to now, really, because I think overall we're like 4 in 18 across all competitions, which isn't great. So we just need to kind of keep up the form and improve that ever so slightly to get back up the table just a little bit, really.
I think when you come back from 2-0 down, obviously it does feel like a point gained, almost feels like a win sometimes, doesn't it? But I think looking at your form, taking out the cup game, because obviously you beat Watford in the FA Cup, but outside of that in the league, you haven't actually won a game since, I think, December 27th against Swansea. Now, to be fair, like Reading had an excellent start of the season. You were around 3rd and 4th, I think, by the time even we went to you, which I think was around September, October time. Define expectations in many ways, but it's petered out a little bit. As I was saying before, that sort of run of form hasn't been tremendous recently. It's not been the best of times over the past few weeks, but How important is that result going to be potentially in the context of the season? Because, like you say, it is kind of a crunch time for everyone, but it's a point gained rather than just like a point lost. It would be a bit different if you were 2-0 up first, but pulling it back. It's a great goal from Hendrick. Could that be quite a pivotal moment in your season to kind of get you back on the run that you were maybe at the start of the season?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, this is probably. I did the Watford preview for those guys last week, and I said this is probably the most open I've known the league for a long period of time. We've been down there, or I say down there, but in this league probably the same time as Birmingham. So we're probably like almost turning into like lifers in terms of the Championship sides that we've got here. But I mean, it is a good point. I think if you mentioned the start of the season, and if we'd started with 4 and 18, Ince doesn't get to his 19th game. It's that simple. So having that balance and those points on the board was so important. And we were playing good football. We were playing okay. You guys kind of came along and smashed that up a little bit for us. Really, we had a few bizarre results as well. We had 4-0 reverse away at Rotherham, which was again a turning point in the season because we went on a really nice run after that. But it's been. It's been frustrating in some respects because although we've been a lot better than we were last season, which was probably the worst season I've known in 30 plus years of supporting the club, there have been times when we've kind of really done ourselves justice in the way that we played, and then kind of times when we've just been absolutely dreadful. So it's very difficult to know A, how good we are, B, how good these players actually are as a group, and C, the long-term expectations of Ince at the club and how he's potentially going to move the team forward or rather not move forward. But yeah, look, you're right. There's no doubt that the weekend was very positive. Getting that point was fantastic. But it still doesn't mask kind of the overriding fear that we're only sort of 2 or 3 games away from going on a losing streak. And that is the concern at the moment, is we've just got to get 3 points on the board just to build the confidence. And, hopefully the comeback and the resilience on Saturday has kind of served for something. And we'll see. As I said, I really don't think it's going to be Saturday. I don't expect us to get anything out of the game against you lot, who were doing very, very well. But it's going to be interesting how the latter part of the season plays out, really.
Yeah, I think you can sometimes tell. I mean, not that Ince was under any pressure, but I think if your players aren't putting in fight backs or trying to get points here or there or trying to kind of just show a bit of mettle, then it becomes a bit of a worry. I suppose when you come back against a very good Watford team, albeit at home, doesn't really matter, they're a good side. It does show that they're at least fighting for the management, fighting for the club, which is always, of course, a massive positive. But I think Reading's a funny one because, like I said in the intro, you've not had the best time of it recently. You had a really good start. But I think when we first came into this league and we were chatting to sort of other fans in the first few games, a lot of people, when I'd say, how do you think Sunderland will do, would say, oh, well, to be fair, you should stay up because Reading and Birmingham are probably certainties to go down. And it really hasn't worked out like that. A lot of it comes down to the fact that you had a really good start to the season, but it did feel like a lot of people had yourselves in Birmingham almost as relegation certainties, almost like a Derby or a Chef Wed over the past few seasons. But it's going to take big swing for that to happen. I know it can happen because there's about what feels like 6 points between every sort of 4 or 5 positions across this league. But I think it's about 9-10 points you're away from the bottom 3. So it would take a bit of a swing. But why do you think Reading have defied those expectations this season? Because it's certainly not what a lot of fans outside of the club thought would happen to Reading this season.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to put your finger on. Really, the key is that we've got characters in the team now. We've got, as you said, players that want to fight. Ince Jr. has just been, well, I mean, he was already player of the season in November, before we broke up for the World Cup. So he's been absolutely outstanding. I think the other thing as well is we've been able to share the goals a little bit. So we haven't relied on sort of one player to get us out of trouble. But really, I just feel like, although we don't have, and this is going to sound really contradictory, we don't have a defined style of play. We do have the formation that's preferred. And we didn't have that last season so much. It was kind of square pegs and round holes all the time. The other thing in recent kind of weeks and months is that our injury list has kind of alleviated a little bit. So last season was just ridiculous. We had so many players out on a regular basis and we could never really pick what would be defined as a kind of a senior squad for each match day. So that's a big thing. And the other thing really is kind of the expectations. I think when we started last season, we brought in some on paper some fairly decent players with experience. We brought in Drinkwater. We had another couple of loans as well. We had Rahman, who came in from Chelsea. Obviously, he's come back this season. Harrell joined, and obviously he's come back as well. But there was other players in and around the team that you thought were really going to kick on, and it just didn't happen. And I think, although we were bad, the expectations were kind of warped a little bit from the start. Whereas this season, most Reading fans, or 99% of Reading fans you talk to, would say, look, the goal is just to stay up. Whether we finish 11th or we finish 21st by goal difference, it doesn't matter. Just stay in the league. Because the kind of restrictions that we're under transfer wise will be alleviated a little bit next season, so it gives us a few more options and makes us a little bit more of an attractive proposition. But ultimately, there's a lot more fight, there's a lot more resilience there. It hasn't completely stopped, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of collapses. We've had quite a few, or too many really, 4-0 defeats this season. But there is a hunger and a desire there, and the fans, home and away, see that now. They see a team responding to adversity a lot more rather than giving up. Last season, on and off the pitch, it was just toxic. It was just absolutely appalling last year. So we would have done very well to to be any worse than we were last season. And that's all we can hope for in this current situation. There's an expectation that we do stay up. And I think at the moment, as you said, we're looking good to do that. I still think there'll be, at least 3 worse teams than ourselves. So we've got a little bit more quality that's starting to come through, and we'll see. It's very, very tight. I think we're 16th at the moment on 38 points, I believe, and that's we're not too far from being sort of top half of the table. If we were to win on Saturday and other results, go our way, then we're back in the top half again. So it's really topsy turvy, as in the league, and it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out for us, really.
Yeah, it's a wild league. Like, the positions you can jump, like I say, it feels like it's 6 points maximum between about 4 to 5 positions, sometimes even in 3. It's just mad, really. Any kind of run, positive or negative, can knock you towards the playoffs or knock you towards relegation. So it's really, really hard to judge. But I suppose everyone knows their own club well, and I know it didn't go too well for Reading last season, as you just sort of touched on there, and I've touched on before what a lot of fans outside of the club probably thought about Reading, but no one knows the club better than your own fans. And I think, weirdly, a lot of people felt like Sunderland would make a real go of it because of momentum and stuff this season, and not every Sunderland fan was too sure. As it is, we've probably done a lot better than expected, actually loads better than expected. But from a Reading perspective, although I've said you've done better than what the pundits thought, or what maybe people outside of the club thought, what were Reading fans' thoughts on this season? Were you kind of worried that it was going to be what a lot of other people thought, or did you have sort of more hope than that?
I think as a lower league football fan, you've always got to have hope, and you've always got to hope that things are always going to be better. I say lower league, we're very lucky in recent seasons to still be in the Championship and still be dining at that table, to be honest. It's difficult because, it was a little bit, you're never going to speak for every fan, and I would never presume to do that. But, certainly sort of the stuff that we did, pre-season with our own fans and kind of, mini interviews and things like that, the expectation and the hope was that we would stay up, but there would be a team that we could get behind and kind of believe in. And if you look at those objectives, we've definitely done that. The problem really now is that there are some people that feel that Ince isn't probably getting out the best of the certainly the attacking players that we've got, and kind of playing on the front foot to kind of use that cliche a little bit. We've got some good attacking players. We've got Lucas Jow, Shane Long obviously is kind of in his swan song really, but he's a decent player on his day. We've got Mate, obviously Andy Carroll, Tom Ince obviously has been absolutely superb. So there's components there that it just hasn't worked. I think we've tried every formation going with, or every combination going with those forward players. It's just not clicked in terms of partnerships. So there are rumblings now where people are saying, look, Ince has been great this season. Ince senior here, but actually next season we need to move in a different direction and give someone else the possibility to build a little bit more. And I would, as much as I like Paul Ince, I've met him on a number of occasions. He's very, very honest, very upfront. But there's sometimes an element where he's not He's not really taking the emotion out of a game or a situation. There's an element where essentially kind of throws his players under the bus a little bit, whereas actually what you want is a bit more of a measured response. And as Reading fans, we kind of, dined out on managers previously that have just been completely neutral, whether it's win, lose or draw. And I think we need some stability like that back in the club now, and someone who's going to be able to go, this is your project for 2 or 3 seasons and crack on with it. We've had far too much upheaval in the dugout and certainly in the top office with, directors, owners, directors of football and everything else. So what we're looking for now is stability to move on. And I don't think anyone would say, yeah, we're going to be in Europe in 5 years' time, but something along the lines where we're going to be a little bit more competitive in this league and have a mentality where we can go into the kind of bigger games and kind of compete a lot more than we have done in the last sort of 3 or 4 seasons. So it's on paper at the moment, it's almost job done. Once we're safe, it's completely job done for most Reading fans. But there is now a bit of an eye on next year in terms of saying, what else can we do with this squad? What else can we add to what we've got? What young players can we be serious about that can come through, our very famous academy? Because for a long time, that was a jewel in the crown. We've had some great players come through there. We just need to be a little bit better at recruitment and selling players on and just kind of not be done to all the time. And I know we've had to take on medicine with the restrictions and the ridiculous amounts of money that we spent for a championship side. But now we just need some sort of plan moving forward. And the people that run the club need to kind of show the fans, I feel, that they're in it for the long haul and they're going to start doing things properly and how we'd expect them to be done at Reading. Because ultimately, unlike yourselves, we're a small market championship side. Historically, probably League One, maybe. Last sort of decade or so, we've been a reasonably solid championship side. I say that because we flirted with the drop quite a few times, but there just now needs to be a bit of a plan moving forward, rather than firefighting. And there are a few people that feel that Ince maybe isn't the man for next season.
Yeah, I found Ince quite an interesting appointment in many ways because he hadn't been in work since 2014, and I felt like you kind of answered one of the questions I was going to ask, and I was going to say, is he the man to take you any further? Because he's done probably better than I think a lot of people would have thought. I think his win record's like 35% or something like that. He's been in charge 40 so many games, about a season's worth if you tally it all together, which is a lot better than what you'd expect from a manager that's been out for so long. But it does feel like his remit is maybe to keep Reading up, and then where do you go from there? Because Sunderland had that a lot of time with our Premier League years, and we had a manager every 6 months to keep us up, and then it was like start again. And I suppose that's the last thing you want. But talking of Inces, I had to talk about the other Ince as well. I think we talked about defying expectations before. Tom Ince, 31. I'll be totally honest. Prior to his move to Reading, it felt like he was a bit of a forgotten man. Being at Huddersfield, Stoke, came with obviously a lot of potential when he was younger, and never really kind of hit those maybe the heights that people really hope you would get. Didn't really do much, kind of middled around in the Championship, and then he's ended up at Reading. And I thought, I'd seen he's been on the score sheet once or twice, but it wasn't really till I looked at his stats sort of prior to sort of the research and watching the highlights ahead of the show that he scored 7 goals and 5 assists now. For a team that's 16th in the league, that's an excellent turnaround, because he's not a straightforward centre forward. To my memory, he's more a winger or someone who could play in a front three. But why has he done so well at Reading? Because he seemed to have a quiet few years, but he's absolutely on fire for you statistically.
I think ultimately he's loved. I know that there was issues at Stoke where they were kind of desperate to move him on, and he came in before Paul came in terms of his dad, and it was a bit of a weird one, because we were like, well, I thought he'd retired, or he was kind of on the way out, or going to sort of League One, League Two. But without him this season, we would be really, really struggling. Obviously his stats, as you mentioned, speak for themselves, but the way that he kind of galvanises the team, he's not captain, he's not held the captain's armband. I'm not sure if he's part of the kind of, the captain's group that you have at clubs these days, but, certainly he's given a lot of license to effectively do what he wants to do. And he's talking the talk, you see him balling at players and shouting and geeing them up and all the rest of it. And, we needed that for a long time. We've had a lot of players that are supposedly experienced, but other players have had to carry them. He kind of carries the team a lot of the time. he's a lot better when he plays in midfield, certainly in attacking midfield, because he runs direct, and we don't have many players that actually run at defences and kind of take them on. Saturday was an interesting one because he kind of played up front, alongside or just off the back of Shane Long, really. And that's, for me, that's interesting because actually he's probably better served in midfield. And obviously, it sounds cliche, but if you take him out of midfield, who else is going to do his job there for him? So it's one of those. He's just being very, very clinical with what he's done as well. I think you mentioned his assists, but I think 4 of those have come straight from corners, which, for a championship player is pretty good, really. And he scares defences because he plays so tightly against them. His end product is very, very good, and he doesn't stop running. It is literally ridiculous. You kind of see him in the 85th minute, and he's still charging balls down in the corner and chasing after defenders and stuff. So he just doesn't stop. Whether or not it's because his dad's there as well, I don't know. There was always that kind of that nepotism element of it. Well, he's getting in the team because of his dad, and he got injured. He had a horror tackle against Hull, I think it was, towards the end of last season, and that was that. And then there was a bit like, well, he's going to start because of his dad, but actually he's backed it up. And really, if you could have if we could have 10 outfield players like Tom Ince, we'd probably be a lot higher up in terms of commitment and quality. So, yeah, look, very grateful for him. I think there was a few clubs rumoured, and I use that very, very loosely, kind of sniffing around him at the end of January. But realistically, there was nowhere else that he was going to go because obviously his dad's there. We love him. I'd like to think the feeling's mutual, and he's kind of given free license to do what he wants to do. So, for us, long may it continue, really. The positive as well, he's under contract. So if we get a silly bid, then he's probably going to be off in the summer potentially. But I don't see that happening at this stage. So yeah, I think he's fast becoming a Reading hero in terms of folklore at the moment.
I think when you look through Reading's squad, you've mentioned some of these players already. There's plenty of players that we'll recognise, plenty people have been around for a long time. Andy Carroll, obviously, he's been around for years. Shane Long, obviously, yes, he's in his swan song, but recognised Premier League striker for a long, long time. But I always find it quite interesting how many players that, maybe not that you don't know about, but the ones that are on form that you wouldn't maybe expect to be on form. The names we'll naturally see will be Carroll, Long, Tom Ince. But is there any players that are particularly on form at the moment that you think could cause Sunderland problems on Saturday that we should maybe keep an eye on?
I think if Aziz starts, he's come back from a fairly difficult time in terms of injury. So he came on against Watford on Saturday and arguably turned the game, really, because he was running those routes that Tom Ince would have done in previous games had he not been up front. So Aziz, can be very, very tricky in terms of being direct and creating chances. In terms of causing you problems, I mean, not so much problems directly, but Joe Lumley has been very, very good for us in goal, and he came with a horrendous reputation from Middlesbrough, obviously from QPR as well, and he was pretty much derided by other fan bases. But after a bit of a shaky start, particularly Rotherham away when we lost 4-0, and it was basically his fault, for want of a better phrase. He's been absolutely fantastic. And he kind of gets what we're trying to do. Like, he's very, very vocal. Like, he's great with the fans. He's been a real kind of rock for us, really. I didn't think I'd say this, but Jeff Hendrick has weighed in with a few goals recently, and he has been very, very hit and miss. Obviously on loan from Newcastle, but he's starting to come into his own a little bit more. And the other player that we don't know very much about, but could be very good in the future, is this guy Cassidy, who's come in from Chelsea, who, I'll be honest, I had to YouTube him because I'd never heard of him, and I had to look at some of his youth games and stuff. He didn't have a great debut at all on Saturday. He was kind of a bit lost in a system. That kind of shock of, I've just left Chelsea for this kind of blood and gut stuff of the Championship. So he could potentially be a very good player for us long term. Other than that, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Lucas Chow. I think the guy's, very, very good. Again, it's become a little bit of a scapegoat for our fans because he doesn't run enough or he doesn't charge balls down or whatever. But over the period of time that we've had him, his goal scoring rate, I think he's got something like 42 goals in 100 appearances, something like that. So, he's been really, really good for us over the years. So if he plays alongside Shane Long, you'd expect him to be hustle and bustle up front and maybe pop up with a goal. But I think, that ultimately that's what we've lacked in terms of a real danger man. Obviously Tom Ince, as we said, is a standout, but we don't, around that group, we don't have anyone else that's really going to push the game and force the issue on our opponents. And I think, that's the frustration with some Reading fans, is that we haven't done enough attack-wise to be able to kind of force the issue in games, really. We'll see. You don't know what Reading is going to turn up, really. Our away form has been dreadful. So we could go there and be absolutely fantastic, or it could be another 4-0 win coming. Who knows? Who knows? We're just enjoying the ride at the moment.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, obviously, the game previously, and you touched about how sometimes you've had a bit of a collapse. I think the game that we had at your place was, we were sort of on the cusp of thinking, oh, this championship lock is not as hard as we thought it might be. And that game itself kind of felt a little bit like the moment Tony Mowbray's something clicked. Obviously, there was that fantastic goal that Jack Clark scored, which is undoubtedly our goal of the season, and hopefully even championship goal of the season. It was a really good goal, but it was probably the game where we thought, maybe could we make a push for the playoffs here? It was coincidentally also the game where we lost Ellis Sims to injury, and coincidentally had no strikers for the best part of 12, 13 games after that. But less of that, and that's another podcast for another day. But what did you make of Sunderland today that turned up at Reading? Because it really felt like that was, in a weird way, the best of Sunderland without having any strikers. Roberts had a good game, we scored the great goal, and it really felt like a real big moment for Sunderland. But what did Reading fans make of the game, and Sunderland in particular?
Honestly, it came out of nowhere. I think up until that point we were doing really well at home, and then you guys turned up and basically just rolled us over. And it just shows you that actually you can be on a poor run of form and then you can play Reading and be brilliant. It's just one of those, really. It was surprising because I didn't expect that to happen. Obviously you guys had lost, or not lost, but Alex Neil had chosen to go. Personally, I've always liked Tony Mowbray. I think he's a fantastic manager. I think he's an even better bloke, to be honest with you. He's someone that one of those managers that you welcome with open arms, or I would certainly at Reading. And I'm, in the context of your season, I'm pleased for him because Sunderland is a club that, I personally respect, and I know a lot of fans do as well. But one of the main things really was your travelling fans as well. It was midweek, long way, as we all know, from Reading to Sunderland and vice versa. But I remember I was trying to do my post-match video, which I do for the Tilehurst End every game, and I had to stop it because you lot were singing so much. I had to just go, right, cut the camera, because I was just going to get derided here. And I think I did in the end. In the end, I was like, look, I want to go home. Like, I've just had enough. So I was doing it, and I don't think anyone could hear what I was saying. So, yeah, it's nice to see that. We all know the Championship is very, very difficult. But it's nice to see good teams doing well and performing to the best of their ability. And, I'm really pleased, without blowing smoke too much towards you, but I'm pleased that you guys are kind of there and thereabouts, because there's a lot of teams in that league that just spend a lot of money to try and get where they are. And Sunderland, for me, aren't one of those clubs. So, I think the game really did surprise a lot of people. And it kind of made us take stock a little bit of where we were going and how we were going to play. And I think, to be honest with you, we probably needed that, because there was, dare I say it, a little bit of arrogance creeping into some of the players in terms of, we've been on that good run of form, particularly at home as well. And it was a massive wake-up call, I think. So, it inadvertently probably did us a bit of a favour long term.
Was it an interesting game in many ways? Because all our 3 goals were scored on the counter-attack. And obviously we're talking about the third one. The first 2 were all right. But it was never really a game where I felt we didn't have possession. It was really hard to describe the game itself, because it felt like, we didn't dominate possession, but Reading didn't either. But yet our 3 goals all came on the counter, as if we'd sat waiting for it to happen. But I'm slightly jealous of you, because I didn't go to that game, because I'm not as good as other fans. I've got to be honest. I could go down to Reading on a Wednesday night in that particular evening. But when it comes to the goal itself, obviously it's hard not to think back at that game and talk about it. What was that goal like in real time? Because obviously it's interesting to hear the perspective from the opposition side, because as much as it was good for us and the outside world watching, it looked nice, it was slick. I suppose when that kind of goal gets scored against you, you do get a little bit annoyed and go, just hit him, like tackle him, do something, whatever. But to watch it, what was it like from the opposition side to kind of see a goal like that?
I was just shouting, just get him, just someone putting a tackle, and the passing move was very, very good. I think it was almost front to back, wasn't it? Back to front even. But yeah, I was just like, just get the ball off him. Just someone like fill that space with just a tackle. Just take one for the team. Yeah, I mean it was nice to see that. It wasn't quite Pep Barcelona, but it was very close in that instance, really. And I think over the game you had an awful lot of possession. I think it was like mid-60s that you had, and I seem to remember you had certainly sort of quite a few shots compared to what we had. So it was well deserved. And I think Ince said after the game, I think remember rightly, he said it was a kick up the backside, and he was right. Because we were quite lazy in that game. We didn't keep the ball particularly well, and we just let you guys do what you wanted to do to us, basically. We gave away far too many fouls, gave the ball away too cheaply, and just didn't do the basics. And I think there's a few games this season where we could say, look, we didn't turn up. We didn't do, even remotely close to what the bare minimum is. And that was one of those games. But take nothing away from the performance that you guys put in. It was, it's a long old journey down in midweek, and to reward your fans with that sort of performance must have been fantastic, really. So yeah, it's I'm hoping that it's not that bad this Saturday, but as I said earlier, you never know.
You really don't in the Championship. You really never know. Could go either way, and I don't think anything would be a surprise with the Championship. It's it was a fantastic night, and like I say, weirdly, we had no strikers really that night. Ellis Sims got injured, and Ross had been injured, I think, the game or 2 games beforehand, and we went on this run of having no strikers. And it's a bit of a sore point because we currently only have 1 fit striker at the moment. But normally when we've played a team before, I'll ask which player stood out for you, and 9 times out of 10, it'll be a Ross Stewart or something like that. But that was a night when we effectively played with like 4 midfielders up front, and also in midfield. It was kind of a weird formation, the way that we ended up having to play for a long, long time. But was there any players in particular that sort of stood out for you? Obviously, Patrick Roberts scored 2 goals, but it was a good performance for us. And it's always quite interesting to see which players stood out from the opposition perspective.
Well, I mean, defensively, I like Danny Bat. Is it Bat or Bath? I never remember, but there's about 17 T's in there, isn't there? So
Bart,
I like
apparently. Bart, apparently, yeah.
It doesn't look quite right, does it? Pritchard, I thought Pritchard was very, very good. I know he came off sort of reasonably early on, if I remember, in the game. But yeah, I mean, look, that's the sign of a good unit, right? You have to play in that system. You deal with the injuries to key players. I know you've just lost Ross Stewart as well. So, I don't expect it to affect you too much because you've got a good group there. The goalkeeper was pretty good. Obviously, kept a clean sheet, Patterson. And 09 as well. I think he's weighed. Has he got a couple of goals this season from memory? But he's done pretty well too. So there are players that will hurt us. But my perception of Sunderland and my knowledge of Sunderland is that you're just a very good unit in terms of you can bring players in and they will just come in and do a job whether they're supposed to do it or not. Amid Diallo, he was quite good. I think he played on the day as well. He's got a couple of goals, isn't he? 7, 8, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Phenomenal.
There's a lot of goals in that team. I know, obviously, Ross Stewart's got the bulk of them, but there are players that can hurt us. And I think realistically, our job is to try and restrict. It sounds very easy on paper, but try and restrict what you do in the game and try and break it down because. From what I've seen of you guys, you're quite defensively resilient, really, and that's going to be tricky for us to kind of unlock that because, as I said, we haven't really made the best of the attacking solutions, in my opinion, to what we've got available. So, it should be a good one. Should be a good one.
Final question as always. Now, normally I sort of preempt this by saying I'm horrendous at predictions, but I actually got one right last week. Believe it or not, I think that's my only 2nd or 3rd of the season. So maybe I'm on a roll, but I'm probably not. But I'll be honest, I do feel quite confident. I feel like I've talked this up a lot, so obviously it's going to be egg on my face in this podcast, but nonetheless, I do feel obviously away from home, you haven't been anywhere near as good as you are at home. We're starting to sort of sort our home form out a little bit. I think we've won 3 of the last 5, give or take, and one of those that we lost was with 10 men. So I'm hoping, based on a really good result away from home at Millwall and then a good result against Borough and obviously a good result in the FA Cup, we'll come through the FA Cup game injury-free, hopefully, the replay on Wednesday. And I'm never confident, but I'm going to go for a 2-0 win. Although my predictions in general are quite terrible apart from last week. But Ben, how are you feeling about it? Can Reading come and sort of upset the apple cart, maybe like Cardiff did a few months ago? Because the championship's a championship, you never really know.
I don't think so. No, we did our predictions last night, and I said 2-0 Sunderland. And if you don't believe me, go and check out the latest podcast by the Tilehurst End. Get that little plug in there for you, Graham. But I don't see us getting anything out of the game. To be honest, if we do, then it's a real positive, really. But I don't see us getting anything out of it whatsoever. I'll tell you a quick story before we go, if that's right, Graham. I'm not actually going to the game because going to Sunderland has scarred me forever. I went to the 2012 game in the Premier League in August, and there was 5 of us. Yeah, a mate of mine was like, "Look, I'm getting a new car." He had one of those old Corsas, and he said, "Okay, look, we'll take my car because I'm getting rid of it in the next week." So we all pile into this old style Corsa, 3 doors. Remember, Graham, in the old versions. We get all the way up to Sunderland. We're all in Reading shirts because we're idiots. We get out of a petrol station and the guy goes, "Oh, all right, lads, from Reading." It's like, "Yeah, shirt probably gave it away." And he goes, "Oh, the game's been called off." And we're like, "No, all right, whatever, mate. Yeah, see you later, have a good day." And literally, when we were driving up, there wasn't too much rain, really. But, clearly there was in Sunderland. And we get to the ground and there's a steward turning cars around going, "Yeah, the game's been called off." And we were like, "Yeah, but we just come from Reading though. It's taking us like 5 hours or whatever in this car, stopping every 2 hours to fill it up and kind of pump up the tyres and stuff." He's like, "Yeah, the game's called off. It's waterlogged pitch." And as we're kind of like debating with the steward as if to like, this is a really awful, joke that he's got here. Brian McDermott, who was our manager at the time, has come out of the stadium and has seen us and just said, "Yeah, lads, let the game's off." Just spoke to the referee and he can't play it. And we were like, "It's the Premier League though, and it's August." He's like, "Yeah, it's literally soaked to bits." And for that reason, I can never go back to Sunderland because I'm just scarred from it. So maybe one day I will. Maybe if I get a hospitality or something. I did get a free program out of it, though, collector's item, because I said, "Look, I'm going to go and get a program because I've got to do something for the next 5 hours." And it was just like, "Yeah, have it, mate. They're all going. They're for free." And I was like, "Great, thanks very much." So I got a box of programs and took them back to the Sports Trust. But yeah, that's why I can never go to Sunderland ever again, as much as I'd like to. I just can't do it. Imagine that Premier League game in August gets called off because of a waterlogged pitch. Bonkers.
I remember that actually quite well, and Sunderland fans will remember that quite well because we'd made 2 very big signings prior to the night before. I think Friday in anticipation was massive because it was our first home game of the Premier League season. I think we'd got a draw away at Arsenal, I want to say, on the opening game of the season. So everything felt dead positive. You thought, no offense, but Reading at home, winnable game. Let's see what we can do. And then, August, waterlogged pitch. Never happened before, never happened again. And if I remember correctly, it took until November, and it was a midweek game we got rearranged to, and I think we won 3-0.
Yeah, it was when we were on the way down massively. But I have to say, before we went, we stopped at a pub, and your fans were first class. Like, they were buying us drinks, and obviously not the driver because that's illegal. But they were buying us drinks and stuff, and they were first class, really. So for that reason alone, just to kind of see how good your fans were and be up there was great. But I don't think I'll ever go back to Sunderland unless, of course, it's a relegation decider or a playoff. Maybe we'll see. But yeah,
interesting times, and it transported me back to a time when. Yeah, because I travelled down from Glasgow that day, and I think I got in there about 1:00 in the afternoon. Yeah, that wasn't a great day. You put a little plug in before, Ben, but obviously, I think a lot of people will know, obviously, your podcast because it's been going for a long time. But for people who haven't heard sort of your stuff, and I think it's interesting to hear the opposition perspective before and after a game, especially when you're playing ourselves. Where can it be found? Where can you be followed and things like that?
So obviously on Twitter, on Facebook, although that's kind of a bit of a dying channel these days, really.
A little bit.
we kind of knock out, various articles. I do a bit of a light-hearted match day column, which is called View from the Dolan, which is just me talking about what I've had for lunch in the lead up to the game, basically. And then we do a couple of like post-match videos and stuff. And there's kind of all sorts going on, really. But the podcast will be on Spotify, Podbean, wherever you get your podcast from, without sounding like an Amazon Prime advert. But it's wherever you get your podcast from. So yeah, if you want to have a listen. We did the Sunderland preview last night, so that's available. But yeah, check us out if you want a bit of a slightly balanced view on football and Reading Football Club, basically.
And I can guarantee you can do introductions better than I can. Like I say, this will mean nothing to anyone listening because, of course, I will edit it. But like I say, it took me about 7 attempts to do the introduction today. I seem to have developed some sort of stutter, but there you go. But Ben, thanks very much for popping on. Obviously, great chat. I wish you luck for the rest of the season, apart from on Saturday, of course, which I'm sure those sentiments are echoed. But thanks for popping on, mate. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem, Graham. Enjoy your holiday, and best of luck for the rest of the season. And hopefully you guys will get in the playoffs and kick on a little bit more. But thanks for having me on today, mate. I appreciate that.
Pleasure, mate.